Hey folks, Dave Harwood here. Thought I'd have a look at my soybean plot on my farm. Gonna start just going across 4 varieties I have planted, and we'll see what is separating these things on this August 31st date, as maturity is not far around the corner. So here we are in the variety of fullest maturity that we have in the plot, 27A17. Just pan across, have a look at what we're seeing. Generally good standability. These are planted in 30-inch rows. The only real foliar disease or plant disease that we're seeing at this stage is sudden death syndrome, and we rate 27A17s as a 5 for sudden death, which is an average score. And I would say it's an above average year for sudden death syndrome in soybeans. These beans, by the way, were planted May 11th. And you can see some of the interveinal chlorosis typical of sudden death showing up on some plants. The occasional plant showing more severe symptoms. Looks like there's one up here. Yeah, here's a little patch, and this is what we'll see with sudden death, that it's spatially variable in a field. It's a fusarium fungal disease that resides in the soil. So you'll see patches, a little bit of a patch here. So the average score for sudden death in 27A17 is maybe showing up here, but it's fairly late onset, so I'm not expecting this high-yielding variety to suffer very much because of sudden deaths. Let's move on to the next variety, which you see in the distance there, 25A54X. So now let's have a look at 25A54X. This variety, of course, a couple days earlier than 27A17X, and is a score lower for sudden death syndrome. But this is one of the fascinating things about this pathogen, the timing of planting, relative maturity of varieties. Just makes it a difficult one to understand at times, because here 25A54X, based on the field reaction at this location, I would conclude it is handling sudden death syndrome a wee bit better than is 27A17, which we score 1 score higher. So really a pretty impressive canopy with these guys. I would say they're a titch taller than 27A17s, which are about 12 rows over. Kind of hard to pick out on the video, I'm sure, but looking pretty strong. No real agronomic complaints here. So let's go have a look at our next one, 24A80X's, as we go just a notch earlier. I am now standing on the break between 24A80X's and 25A54X's, which we were just looking at, and pretty hard to tell these guys apart, to be honest, except for we're seeing just an indication that maturity is on its way with 24A80X's. You're starting just to see some yellowing occurring in the upper canopy, and if we look down in there, a little more yellowing moving its way up the plant. Now we rate these a 6 for sudden death, the best score of the materials in this plot. And yeah, I'd say sure enough, in this field we're not seeing as many plants that have obvious sudden death syndrome symptoms in this strip of 24A80X's. So let's go on to the earliest variety, 21A28X. Well, I lied to you earlier. I'm now in the plot of 21A28X, the earliest variety in the plot. And earlier I said we had 24A80s were the highest rated variety in the plot for sudden death. And in fact, it is 21A28X that has the best sudden death score and is the earliest variety. And I think here we see really nice plant health. I'm standing on the break between these and 24A80X's. There's a visual difference between the varieties, to be sure, but really good plant health in 21A28X. So it'll be interesting to watch these varieties as we go. One thing of note with sudden death, which we, as I've said, is probably one of the most common visual pathogens in the area right now, is the spatial variability in the field. And here's a spot that has more severe symptoms. There's a spot a little further over So you really have to be careful in interpreting what you see with sudden death, and make sure that field variation isn't clouding your interpretation of varietal differences. Anyway, thought you might enjoy a bit of a evening walk through a soybean plot. I wish everyone well for a successful fall harvest.